Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something really relevant to how all of us learn, the impact of artificial intelligence on education.
That's right.
We've got a fascinating talk we're going to explore, sort of breaking down what it says about AI's potential and, well, what history tells us about new tech in the classroom.
Exactly.
Our mission for you today is really to cut through the AI hype and understand its real role in learning based on, solid ideas about how our brains actually work.
Yeah, it's not enough to just say AI will change everything. We need to understand how it might change things, and maybe more importantly, what that means for how you learn best.
Okay, so the talk we're looking at kicks off by describing this really impressive AI tutor demo from about 10 months prior.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, this thing could guide a student through a geometry problem, helping them really nail down the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse sides of a triangle.
Yeah, you see that, and the immediate reaction is just, wow.
Right. It's easy to see that wow factor, and the speaker in the talk emphasizes just how fast AI is developing. You can't help but wonder, is this it? Is this the future of how we'll all learn?
It's a compelling picture for sure. I mean, having a personalized tutor available anytime sounds great.
Oh, yeah.
But as the talk points out pretty quickly, we've kind of been here before.
We really have. History is just full of technologies that were supposed to completely revolutionize education.
Oh, the list is long, isn't it?
It really is. Motion pictures. Thomas Edison even said they'd pretty much replace textbooks and boost efficiency by something like, 98%?
98%. It's almost comical looking back. Then came radio, right? The idea was expert instruction beamed into every classroom.
Yeah, maybe even making teachers obsolete, which is a recurring theme, it seems.
Definitely. Fast forward to the 50s, you get TV in schools, then interactive computers, Seymour Papert's turtle programming at MIT in the 80s.
Oh, yeah, I remember Logo. And video discs in the 90s, and then more recently, MOOCs, massive open online courses. Each one was hailed as the next big thing.
And what's fascinating and kind of sobering for you to note is that despite all that initial buzz, and sometimes even studies showing, no real difference in learning outcomes, these revolutions just never quite delivered on the promise. We still have textbooks, teachers are still absolutely crucial, and we still hear the same sorts of concerns about education.
Right. And the talk points out current headlines like, Brave New, how AI will revolutionize education. And it just echoes all that past enthusiasm, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it really does. So you have to ask the question the talk asks. Why? Why didn't those past revolutions happen?
The talk throws out a few possibilities. Maybe institutions are just inherently slow to change. Inertia?
Could be. Or maybe the technology was just overhyped. It couldn't actually deliver what was promised.
Or, and this is the central question the talk really digs into, maybe we just didn't have truly intelligent AI until now. Is this time different?
That's the setup. Is AI fundamentally different? But to figure that out, for you, for us, we need to understand how learning actually works. And that's where the talk brings in Daniel Kahneman's work.
Thinking fast and slow. System 1 and System 2.
Exactly. A really useful framework.
Okay, so System 1 is that fast, intuitive, almost automatic thinking. It's your gut reaction, right? Operates without much conscious effort.
Quick, effortless, runs in the background.
System 2, though, that's the slow, deliberate, effortful one. It's like that inner voice you use when you're really concentrating trying to solve a tricky problem.
Yeah, the one that takes actual work. The talk uses that classic riddle to show the difference perfectly.
The bat and ball one. A toy bat and ball cost $1 knowing the ball. How much is the ball?
Go on, what's your first instinct?
10 cents. It just jumps out.
Exactly. That's System 1, grabbing the easy numbers, doing a quick surface-level calculation. But if you engage System 2, you slow down and think it through.
Right, because if the ball was 10 cents, the bat would have to be $1.10 to be $1 more.
And the total would be $1.20, which is wrong.
So you have to override that initial guess. The ball is actually 5 cents.
5 cents for the ball, $1.05 for the bat, adds up to $1.10. It takes that slower, more deliberate System 2 thinking to get there.
It's amazing how easily System 1 can trip us up. The talk even personifies them, like System 2 is this careful, methodical thinker.
And System 1 is just rapid fire, drawing on everything stored in your long-term memory, all your past experiences.
There's that great little anecdote in the talk, too, about asking Carlos how long it takes the Earth to go around the sun.
Oh, yeah. His first answer, a day.
Classic System 1.
Yeah.
Based on the daily cycle we experience, then System 2 kicks in.
And corrects it to a year. It shows how System 1 gives quick, sometimes wrong, answers based on immediate associations, and System 2 has to step in.
And that correction takes effort.
Yeah.
System 2 is, well, lazy isn't quite the right word, but it takes energy to use.
It's a limited resource. You can't sustain that intense focus forever. Which brings us neatly to working memory capacity.
Right, the mental scratch pad. The talk mentions George Miller's famous paper, The Magical Number 7, plus or minus 2.
Though, as the talk points out, more recent research suggests it's probably closer to maybe 4 chunks of new information we can hold and manipulate at once.
Still, it's surprisingly small. The talk describes that simple digit span task, right? Remember numbers, then add 1 or 3 to each.
Yeah, try it with like 6 or 7 digits. It gets really hard, really fast.
And what's fascinating is the physical side of it. When System 2 is really working hard, your heart rate goes up, maybe you sweat a bit, your pupils actually dilate.
It shows real, measurable effort. This effort is what cognitive scientists call cognitive load.
And the talk breaks that down into 3 types, which sounds maybe a bit technical, but it's super important for understanding learning. There's intrinsic load.
Which is just how difficult the material itself is. Some things are just harder than others. You can't change that inherent complexity easily.
Then there's extraneous load. That's all the unnecessary stuff that distracts you.
Like a badly designed PowerPoint slide or someone talking next to you, or maybe just a really uncomfortable chair. Stuff that uses up mental energy but doesn't help you learn.
And finally, the good kind. Germane load. That's the effort you spend actually thinking about the material, connecting it to what you already know, building understanding.
So for you, the learner, the goal is to manage that intrinsic load. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Definitely minimize the extraneous load, the distractions.
And really maximize that germane load, the deep thinking part.
Exactly. That's effective learning.
Okay, but if working memory is so limited, how do we ever manage to learn complex things like, say, becoming a chess master?
That's where long-term memory and this idea of chunking come in. The talk uses a classic chess study.
Right, they showed novices and masters of chessboard from the middle of a game for just a few seconds.
The novices could only remember maybe 4 or 5 positions, typical working memory limit.
But the masters, they could remember way more, like 16 or even 20 pieces.
But here's the kicker. If the pieces were just randomly placed on the board, not in a real game position.
The masters are no better than the novices. They were back down to remembering maybe 4 or 5 pieces.
Exactly. So it wasn't about having a generally better memory. It was about expertise. The masters, through years of practice, had stored countless game patterns in their long-term memory.
So they weren't seeing individual pieces, they were seeing chunks.
Precisely. They saw meaningful patterns like a fianchettoed bishop structure or a common king's Indian defense setup as single chunks. What looks like 20 pieces to a novice is maybe 4 or 5 chunks to a master.
Like how the year 1945 isn't 4 separate numbers to us, it's one chunk representing a whole lot of history.
Perfect analogy. Or how a physicist sees a complex equation not just as symbols, but as one chunk representing a fundamental law or relationship.
So expertise is built by loading up your long-term memory with these interconnected chunks of knowledge through practice and experience.
And this allows your System 1, your fast thinking, to recognize patterns and react much more efficiently within that specific domain.
Which also explains why expertise is usually domain-specific, right? Being a chess grandmaster doesn't make you an expert physicist.
Exactly. The talk kind of pushes back on the idea of purely general thinking skills.
Yeah.
What we develop are these incredibly rich, domain-specific knowledge structures.
So when people say a class taught them how to think, what probably happened is they built up those chunks and patterns within that specific subject.
That seems much more likely, based on the cognitive science. Magnus Carlsen, the chess champ, has even said that playing at his level feels largely like pattern recognition. His System 1 is just incredibly well-trained for chess.
Okay, so if that's how learning works, managing cognitive load, building chunks in long-term memory through effortful practice, what does this mean for teaching, or for how you should approach learning yourself?
The talk lays out some really practical implications based on these principles. First off, eliminate extraneous cognitive load.
Get rid of the distractions. Makes sense. Comfortable seating, clear visuals, easy-to-read text, good audio, basic stuff. But it actually matters for freeing up mental energy.
Absolutely. Second, manage the intrinsic load. Start where the student is. Break complex stuff down into bite-sized pieces.
Don't introduce too many new concepts all at once. The talk used the example of learning music, right? Start with a familiar song.
Yeah, so you can focus on learning the notation without also struggling with a completely new tune and rhythm simultaneously. Keep the initial challenge manageable.
And another key point was about slowing down.
Yes. The harpist example. Deliberate, slow practice. It feels counterintuitive sometimes, we want to rush, but that slow, effortful engagement is often what builds deep, lasting understanding and long-term memory. That's system 2 doing its work.
So for you listening, maybe resist the urge to just skim or rush through things you're trying to learn deeply.
It's crucial. The talk also cautions against just throwing learners into the deep end, what's sometimes called unscaffolded discovery learning.
Right, the idea that you just figure it all out yourself with minimal guidance.
While active thinking is vital, removing support too early can just overload your working memory. It's like trying to navigate a brand new city without any map or GPS at all.
You need some initial support, like worked examples to study or clear explanations, and then gradually fade that support as you build competence.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot, challenging learners enough to engage System 2, but not so much that they're overwhelmed.
And maybe the most fundamental point, repeat effortful practice until mastery. You have to automate the basics.
Think about times tables or basic grammar rules or fundamental coding syntax. If those aren't automatic, if they're not handled by System 1,
They'll keep hogging your limited working memory when you're trying to tackle more complex problems that build on them.
precisely. That automation is key to freeing up mental resources.
Okay, and one last point was about actually encouraging active thinking, the germane load.
Yeah, the slightly counterintuitive idea, like that study where making the bat and ball riddle harder to physically read.
In a faint font, I think.
Right. It actually reduced the error rate because it forced people to slow down and engage System 2 instead of relying on their quick, wrong System 1 guess.
Fascinating. So sometimes making things just a little bit harder can actually promote deeper processing.
It disrupts that automatic pilot. The talk mentioned a confusing ad campaign that did something similar, making people stop and think, wait, what?
Okay, so we have this framework. Learning requires effort, managing cognitive load, building long-term memory via practice. Now let's bring AI back in. Where does it fit?
Well, the talk acknowledges a clear potential benefit. AI can provide immediate, personalized feedback. That's huge for skill development, right? Knowing right away if you did something correctly or incorrectly.
Definitely. But then there's the big worry.
The big worry is that AI might short-circuit the whole process. If AI can write your essay, solve your math problem, generate your code, or create your artwork.
Why would you put in the effort to learn to do it yourself? And if you don't put in that effort, you don't build those crucial long-term memory structures.
Exactly. You don't develop the automated skills, the deep understanding. Are we potentially outsourcing the very effort that constitutes learning? That's the core concern.
So this brings us back to those initial questions the talk posed. First, why aren't people learning as effectively as we might hope sometimes?
And the talk offers a more, maybe generous perspective than just blaming laziness. Our brains evolved for survival, for social connection, for dealing with the immediate environment.
Abstract academic knowledge, like historical dates or geometric theorems, isn't necessarily the brain's top priority unless we make it so.
Right, it takes conscious effort and motivation to learn that stuff. Which leads to the second question. Why haven't those past tech revolutions actually revolutionized education?
And the speaker suggests maybe it's because technology is often focused just on information delivery. But perhaps information delivery isn't the main bottleneck.
Maybe the core of education is actually the social dynamic, the relationship between teacher and student, the community of learners, the motivation, the accountability.
The talk uses that great analogy of a teacher being like a personal trainer for learning. They guide you, motivate you, hold you accountable for doing the hard work.
And maybe technology hasn't been able to replicate that effectively, at least not yet.
Okay, so the Q&A after the talk offered some more specific thoughts on AI's role going forward. What were some key points there?
Well, someone asked about just using AI for quick answers versus looking things up. The speaker thought, if the AI is reliable, efficiency is good. No point being slow for slowness' sake.
Makes sense. What about getting these cognitive insights into actual education policy?
That's tough, the speaker acknowledged. Research translation is always hard. But there is growing interest in evidence-based methods like, say, direct instruction, which aligns with some of these cognitive principles.
And the arts. If AI can create art, does that diminish human creativity?
The speaker seemed less concerned there, suggesting maybe people create art for intrinsic reasons for the process itself, not just the final product. So AI might be a tool, not a replacement for the drive to create.
There was definitely concern, though, about AI hindering that crucial system 2 engagement, right? Making us mentally lazy.
Yeah, a very valid point. If answers are always easy, do we lose the habit of struggling and thinking deeply? Does it reduce curiosity?
And the idea of scaling up good teaching. The speaker suggested maybe the answer isn't purely technological.
Right. Maybe it's simpler, though harder politically and economically. Just having more well-trained, well-supported human teachers might be more effective than relying solely on tech.
But AI could still be a useful tool.
Absolutely. As scaffolding, providing hints, offering targeted practice questions based on a student's specific weaknesses, that seems like a good use case.
But then there's the assessment problem. How do you know if a student learned something if AI did the assignment?
Big challenge. The need for more AI-proof assessments, maybe more in-class work, oral exams, things that require real-time demonstration of understanding.
And motivation. How do you get students to want to do the effortful work?
Still the fundamental challenge. Tapping into intrinsic interest seems key, but it's not always easy.
Someone asked about long videos like the talk itself causing cognitive overload.
The speaker acknowledged it's a consideration, but argued that longer formats allow for deeper dives for those who are engaged, and features like pausing and replaying give learners control.
What about successful online edutainment? Why does that seem to work?
Well, it often serves a different goal than formal education, maybe focusing on highlights, being highly engaging, and benefiting from a huge global audience finding niche interests.
And AI friendships. Could AI tutors become so realistic they fulfill a social need?
That opened up some fascinating philosophical questions about social connection and the potential impact of highly realistic AI companions or tutors. Still very much hypothetical territory.
The speaker also made a distinction between technology being a revolution versus just a tool.
Yeah, suggesting that in education, unlike some other fields, tech often gets absorbed as just another tool without fundamentally changing the core pedagogical approach as much as initially predicted.
So keep AI for, and maybe remove it for?
Keep it for things like drill and practice with immediate feedback.
Right.
Remove it, or be very cautious for unsupervised tasks where it allows students to bypass the learning process entirely.
And evaluation remains a huge question mark in the age of AI.
Definitely. Assessing genuine learning when AI can generate plausible work is a major hurdle schools and universities are grappling with right now.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. As we finish this deep dive, we've journeyed through the history of hyped educational tech.
The cycle of revolutions that weren't quite revolutions?
We've really dug into the cognitive science system 1, system 2, working memory, cognitive load, and the absolute necessity of effortful practice for building robust long-term memory.
Those mental chunks that define expertise.
We've weighed the potential of AI, especially for feedback, against the very real concern that it could undermine the effort needed for genuine learning.
And we've landed back on the idea that maybe the human social element, the teacher-student relationship, the learning community, is more central to education than technology alone can address.
So this leaves you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over, maybe something provocative.
Yeah, considering everything we've discussed today, based on this speaker's perspective, how might you, in your own life, intentionally approach learning something new? How can you consciously engage your system too? How can you structure your practice to build lasting understanding in your long-term memory, regardless of whether AI tools are available?
What kinds of learning experiences are going to be most valuable for you in a future that's inevitably going to be shaped more and more by intelligent machines?
It's definitely something worth thinking about as you continue your own learning journey.